there are a few women who haunt me. There's something about these women that speaks to me more deeply than almost any other person or portrayal of person in creative media as exists. It's beyond admiration, it's captivation. I call this woman the Tormented Heroine, and there are 14 women for me who represent her. The Tormented Heroine embodies a quiet defiance against erasure from the world, a refusal to vanish. Their darkness is often visible in their expression, look, behaviour, voice, and yet there is also a beauty and sensuality to them that speaks of depth, the unknown, possibly even the unknowable. Something in their ache, how they've been split open over and over again and are often quietly living from pain, yet they still create, breathe, and move with life and the pain itself, alchemizing it into more. I'm going to be exploring the uniting thread of these 14 women, some characters, some real people, and unpack what impact embodying this archetype might have on our creative work. Does she serve to unlock deeper, more textured chambers of our creative self, a primordial sense of daringness, of spirit, and a rich diversity to our creative work? Or is it actually the opposite? Is there a terrible risk to going deeper with her as she poses a threat to our internal sense of stability, self, or identity? Could aligning with her force us to entirely crumble our life as we know it and have ourselves rebuild as a currently unknowable and therefore vaguely threatening new person with dubious creative ideas and execution? The stakes are high for both our integrated sense of self and the impact of our creative work. So let's explore who the Tormented Heroine is and how and even if we ought to attempt to embody her archetypal energy. Let's rewind to where this all began. A while back, I listened to a podcast of the Creative Pep Talk where the host invited you to reflect on every bit of creative media that you've ever consumed over your lifetime and pick out the things that have deeply touched you, spoke to you on the deepest of levels, and you feel either in profound or subtle ways have transformed you. First of all, let's just appreciate how significant this exercise is to choose the impacting media of all of the media you've ever consumed in your lifetime. So for me, that's 40 years of movies, books, artwork, music, video games, so probably thousands of pieces of media. As I looked more closely at this list, I noticed there was an emergent pattern in many of the women on it. They all seem to exude this ache in the way they carry and express themselves and in the art that they make. It's like they've experienced and continue to experience pain, yes, but this pain is a part of who they are, whether a character or person in real life. The best term I could come up with to describe her is the Tormented Heroine.
You don't know anything about anything! None of you, nothing! Please, don't be vexed. I don't know anything about anything. Like you said.
I noticed one unifying thread in the Tormented Heroine. She fits well within the rebel, exile, misfit, outsider archetype. Notably, and more specifically, the orphan, Jane Eyre, lost her parents and was bullied by her aunt's children. Yennefer from The Witcher, disfigured and rejected by her family. Ciri, orphaned. Mary from The Secret Garden, orphaned. Ellie from The Last of Us, an orphan. Even where she's not necessarily orphaned, she embodies a spirit of the outsider. She doesn't fit in, belonging both nowhere and everywhere at once, like Ciri roaming the continent, Ellie able to travel across the country with Joel, a stranger. She has no ties to anywhere. Or even Wendy from The Ice Storm. Although part of a family, she portrays this existential outsider status, an observer and emotionally empty in her experimentation with intimacy.
I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
Outsider archetypes aren't constrained by society's expectations of them, so they very often have a strongly defined sense of self. This is often reflected in the clothes that they wear, or they have oddball behavior.
You know what I do when I feel completely unoriginal?
Blah, 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 blah.
I make a noise or I do something that no one has ever done before, and then I can feel unique again, even if it's only for like a second.
Or they have a grumpy or cantankerous nature.
Waiting on me makes you my servant, then. You are strange.
They're not trying to please anyone, which in this sense basically means non-compliance with how the world thinks they ought to express themselves. Their isolation isn't a sentimental or nostalgic kind of loneliness, but an existential aloneness that requires a defiance to continue being. It's as if the world were trying to stamp them out over and over again, and their defense is not just survival, but an assertion. They refuse to be overlooked, and they won't be made to disappear, and they will remain true to themselves in that process.
Am I a machine without feelings? Do you think that because I am poor, obscure, plain and little, that I am soulless and heartless? I have as much soul as you and full as much heart. And if God had blessed me with beauty and wealth, I could make it as hard for you to leave me as it is for I to leave you.
Ironically enough, the outsider often helps others feel safe, seen and understood, providing them with a feeling of belonging, which can actually make them highly attractive to others. So think about Geralt with Yennefer, Colin with Mary, Mr. Rochester with Jane Eyre, Christina Ricci's character Kat Harvey and Casper. I would also argue that this is to an extent what they are providing for me through my captivation with them. The part of me that feels like an outsider and existentially alone seeks belonging in drawing nearer to them as I find their way of being validating. This isn't belonging in the shallow sense of a societal place, but that bone deep knowing that you are allowed to belong in this reality, that it's okay to exist. Another unifying thread that the women of this list seem to exhibit is they embody the dark feminine. They seek reunification with the dark and exiled aspects of the feminine psyche, coming out of the performative feminine and willingly, or maybe just incidentally, into the true, raw, messy, unpalatable, dark feminine archetypes. It's beautiful, uncensored, often erotic, but an interiorized kind of eroticism, self-possession, an embodiment of the inner world of feminine sensuality and depth of feeling. Great examples of this are the witch in Left 4 Dead, the game, weeping, wailing, and screaming, and full of power and pent-up explosive rage. Elements of the goth or dark beauty, which shows up in the aesthetic representation of the dark feminine, and the dark feminine sensual creative like Lana Del Rey, holding melancholia, sensuality, and raw truth in her lyrics without trying to tidy any of it up. These women don't just dip into the darkness and out again, they descend into the darkness of this feminine, often staying there for extended periods to map out its topography, doing what's necessary to saturate themselves in this darkness and embody it outwardly in their creative expression. The third pattern relates to wounds, grief, abuse, and loss as the invitation into alchemy with these women. They tend to the pain, they don't deny it. Ellie, Yennefer, Mary, Jane Eyre, Lana Del Rey, and the witch, they have all experienced grief and loss of some kind or another, and they refuse to be destroyed by it. They embody the coexistence of pain and suffering with beauty. In fact, they often alchemize pain into power, self-authority, or greater spectrum of experience. For example, Yennefer finally releases her chaos across the battlefield at the end of season 1 of The Witcher, incinerating the opposition and ending the battle. Or Viola Davis has repeatedly said that pain and shame, particularly sourced from the trauma of her childhood of poverty and physical abuse, creates emotional availability, and that acting is opening wounds in service of truth. Similarly, Lana Del Rey has openly said that her sense of social isolation and not belonging in early adulthood are all emotional difficulties that have been drawn upon rather than avoided in her work. For them, depth of feeling and pain are the doorway into deeper perception. They allow themselves to reclaim and integrate the rejected aspects of self: rage, anger, obsession, wildness, hunger, and they transmute that pain and loss into beauty. Lana through poetry and song, Cassina through video and music, Yennefer into literal beauty, and Mary into the creation of the garden. Another pattern that I've noticed in these women is that they bring the shadow aspects of self to the light, and in doing so demonstrate and consciousness. A great example of this is Kristen Ritter's character in the TV show Don't Trust the Bitch in Apartment 23. She routinely behaves in ways society at large wants women to repress, ignore, or deny. She manipulates people to get what she wants. She lies without guilt. She prioritizes her own comfort, money, and pleasure. She also shows an interesting juxtaposition of being caring, loyal, and affectionate, which rather confusingly for the audience makes her quite likable.
Get out of here, you little slut. I love you. I got you something. It's a casual sex kit. There is makeup remover, cab fare, energy bar, instant coffee, tweezers, tampons, pepper spray, a short article, and pictures of me for the casual sexer. I'm a casual sexer!
This is how she demonstrates and consciousness. You can be self-serving without apology and still be likable. It makes my brain implode. Another is Ellie from The Last of Us Part 1. During her confrontation with Joel at the ranch, Ellie calls him out directly that he is forming an attachment with her, though Joel's coping strategy in that moment is to try and pull away and distance himself. Ellie refuses to play along with that, naming the truth. She cares for him, she fears abandonment, and she knows that he cares about her too.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad.
Although Ellie has experienced great loss, she constantly chokes. Both of these are examples of her demonstrating and consciousness. You can have been abandoned at every turn in your life and still develop attachment. You can hold pain, trauma, and humor simultaneously.
Oh, hello. Sorry, the dinosaurs are busy right now.
What are you doing?
Oh, wait. One of the dinosaurs is here. Joel, it's for you.
Her and consciousness lets us see that you don't have to be defined by your suffering, and your pain and shadow aren't ugly in every way and ought to be hidden. To be honest, I very frequently inhabit the other end of the spectrum, or consciousness. I live with and don't question the inner voice that says, usually with contempt, you can't have this and also expect that. It's one thing or the other. The two are mutually exclusive. These women or characters are living and breathing embodiments of how that is not true. They are literally mending the separation or this artificial apartness that my psyche has accepted and solidified into truth. If you've reached this far in the video, I imagine there's something in the Tormented Heroine archetype that speaks to you. When you reflect on your lifetime of media consumption, who are the tormented heroines that stir something awake in you? And how is she still influencing, or could she influence your creative expression if you authentically opened yourself up to her? For me, I think it's because they give me permission in my creative expression. It's like I see a living, breathing someone else in the world, so thoroughly embodying and expressing a part of myself that I believed I could simply never show nor express to the world because it's too raw, too weird, too dark, too whatever. These people or representing characters are literally being the existence of the thing I thought was impossible to reveal. On a deeper level, this opens my internal landscape to holding complexity of character and experience, and the possibility that you can hold multiple states of seemingly contradictory states of being in one time. You can be attractive and wild. You can have a cold, dark demeanor and people still want to love you. The tormented heroine begins that process of disintegrating and assumed linearity, which adds natural dimensionality and humanity to what I'm creating. I'm not trying to please or belong to some subset of society, nor do I need to constantly monitor and distill my creative expression and try to do what I know to be palatable or strip down my work for the algorithm. All this makes my internal self both relax and rage at the same time. Relax because the tension of holding that part back starts to alleviate. Rage because of the anger of holding it back for so long. Feels like, for what? It was all of my own doing and decision making, and it feels like it was based on a completely false premise. I get so angry. Interestingly, this seems to create both an opening in my creative expression and the fuel to move in new and varied directions. In other words, my creative breadth tolerance increases and my energy has been unlocked to create into this new wider chasm of creativity. Then I start wondering if I can open other creative doors within myself. It becomes this cascade. If I can go here, where previously I thought I couldn't, where else could I go? The illusion of fear starts to break apart and the house of cards begins to crumble. Creative possibilities begin to open up for me internally. As for the impact of the work, my sense is the audience picks up on this trail of honesty and vulnerability and are drawn in, as I am, over and over again by the tormented heroine until that part in themselves has been reclaimed. It becomes this invitation to inner reconciliation or reclamation for others through the creative work. In other words, the creative work becomes deeper embedded into a timeless sense of humanity and therefore of greater service to the collective. And when I lean into this creative energy, I find creative work takes on both a kind of potency and urgency. What wants to come forward from me creatively is not shaped by societal fit and filled with the desire to please multiple varied points of view. Creation becomes a vehicle of pure human necessity, a cathartic urge to expel surplus heat and release contained pressure buildup that inwardly, if left to fester, becomes self-destructive, but as expression released, peace and reconciliation. I mean, it feels like we're living in a world that is the antithesis to the tormented heroine, or at least it wants to be. Internal struggle is erased, the highlight reel is presented as a full story, and characters frequently only experience pain as this mild inconvenience to some end desired state that we've been waiting on from the very opening scene. In fact, this character arc is so pervasive that internet culture has coined a term for it, Mary Sue. The Mary Sues of the world are always strangely competent without experience, morally spotless, and their pain arc is only there to serve as a plot device to her inevitable victory. When you see Mary Sues everywhere, from movies to TVs to shows to books, you start to wonder, is there something wrong with me? Since my journey doesn't seem to remotely reflect any of theirs. When I see the tormented heroine represented in a sea of Mary Sues, I find myself comforted and validated. The pain of the tormented heroine is akin to my own pain, existential, contained, and between myself and God. The interplay of these forces is the terrain and the generator of perception, and the richness of her, or my in this case, narrative emerges as a byproduct. When I see aspects of myself represented in others' creative productions in this way, again, it offers me permission, but also a sense of safety, knowing it's been done before, to bring forward my own representations of this existential war. Interestingly, when you look up the etymology of the word torment, it comes from the root torquer, which means, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, torquer, which means to twist, turn, or wring. When I think about the tormented heroine, there is something about the friction between her inner and outer world that is leading to this psychic or emotional twisting. This idea of twisting to me also speaks of being gripped by something. Consider the wringing of a towel. You need a tight grip and two forces moving in opposing directions. So we feel this somatic metaphor grounded into grip, opposition, and movement. The tormented heroine is gripped by something, haunted by something. There is something in her experience, whether internal or external, that is moving in the opposite direction to her natural self. The suggestion is that in order to resolve the twisting or contorting, one of the opposing forces must give. And this is a crucial aspect about the tormented heroine. She does not compromise herself to ease that opposing force, whether it's someone else's want or a societal pressure or some internalized expectation. The etymology of the word torment has solidified this is an idea for me. Part of the essence of the tormented heroine is that she must live in the torment as part of her existence if she wants to honor her essential self. Otherwise, she has given in to the opposing force. Being in the ache, the pain, the wretchedness is a prerequisite to her being herself. In other words, the twisting, the contorting, retching of her essential self doesn't unmake her. It is in fact what makes her the tormented heroine, the heroine. She is the main character, and our focus on her is as such because she grapples and wages war in service of loyalty to her deepest values and essential self and her transcendence. Okay, so far I've been shining light on the benefits of aligning with and allowing the tormented heroine to work on you creatively. But what if there are risks to truly embodying her that we aren't seeing? The tormented heroine is quite terrifying. I mean, let's be honest. There is so much about her that is confronting. She is demanding that we sit with and alchemize and release the universe in the form of healing, to the world in the form of creativity, the parts of ourselves that we want to hide or repress. She refuses self-betrayal under pressure from outside forces. The thought of letting in that state of being and showing up in the world in that way is deeply unsettling and downright scary. It makes me pick at all of the ways it could go wrong. Could I just fail miserably in trying my own version of her and then just end up being some cheap knockoff of Christina Ricci because I basically didn't manage to go there in any real way? And what if I end up lost in my own introspections? You know, winding these dark corridors of torment and never actually producing anything creative, or worse, maybe even totally incapacitating myself with all of these internal excavations? Or what if I'm the opposite? What if I'm so good at embodying her that she completely takes me over and then I don't know how to hit any other notes except pain, torment, and melancholia? I mean, that might not be so bad because I guess Lana Del Rey has done it quite successfully. But it got me thinking, ironically, what is the dark side of the tormented heroine? As in the true shadowy side, not this nourishing dark side of depth and richness that we've been speaking about so far, but the wounded side of her, the one that cripples creative expression rather than transfigures or releases it. To me, the tormented heroine aligns quite powerfully with the misfit or outsider archetype, which I touched on briefly before. But what I didn't unpack is what happens when the outsider slips into woundedness rather than self-possession. Digging around on the internet, I discovered a useful commentary on this by Susanna Barlow. She describes the outsider as having deep and bitter wounds of being left out, rejected, or unwanted. And in its wounded form, this experience of isolation becomes justification for being shut down and reclusive rather than a conduit to self-ownership, which often means they swing towards self-loathing and doing what's necessary to belong. Have I done this? Yes, most definitely. In fact, it is possible that I am this wounded version more of the time than the other. It suddenly made me feel like I was walking through the twilight zone where everything I thought was real is actually completely illusion. The risk isn't in embodying the tormented heroine and entering some new twisted reality that I can't cope with, but actually I am currently in the twisted reality, and the tormented heroine is actually inviting me into the truth. The search for reasons to not align with the tormented heroine has served to do the opposite, make me more unsettled about where I am and reinforce the importance and urgency of aligning with her. The truth is, where I am now is the trap and she is the path to freedom, the embodied invitation into healing, wholeness, and authentic creative expression, that I want. And that is why I'm so fascinated with her, because I'm peering at her through the looking glass of my fractured self, hoping she'll give me a clue, any clue that will help me piece myself back together and step across into the sovereign version of myself that I'm hungry to become. Ultimately, it seems to me that when you boil down the healing, the reconciliation of fractured parts, not selling out, validation, and so on, the tormented heroine grants those who are drawn to her one major unfurling: permission. For most of my life, the tormented subliminal landscapes have felt like home to me, not as some romanticized fixation on suffering for suffering's sake, but just because that is what has felt like truth. These spaces feel texturally rich, peaceful, and restorative in a way that some, perhaps most people from what I've experienced, find oppressive and terrifying. So often, the rest of the world, and in an effort to belong, much of my own inner dialogue, tells me it's wrong to be in torment and that I need to fix it, or myself, or escape it, and most certainly not show it to the world. Are you crazy? The tormented heroine says, you don't need to escape. You're allowed to be here, and it's okay to create from it and offer that to the world. But here is the catch. In choosing to align with the tormented heroine and the permissions she offers, it comes with a cost. Just as Jane Eyre chose to leave Mr. Rochester, Lana remains immersed in the melancholia, Ciri continues to roam the lands alone, Virginia produced epic works, but from a fractured psyche, Viola continues to revisit and source from the pain of her childhood for her performances. The cost is that you must live in the talk, the grip, the twist, the ring. That's the trade, the price of your freedom of authentic expression. You can't sell out or betray yourself in the face of inevitable opposition from outside or internal forces. And that's going to be hard. It's going to take continuous effort to hold your integrity and remain uncompromised in the face of this force. But it is my belief, and also what I found, that you are rewarded for that effort, and your creative work will benefit in its depth, emotional reach, and honesty. The tormented heroine started this inquiry as an unknown and potentially dangerous enigma, but now I see her as a mentor of uncompromised and permissive creative force, and when embodied, the facilitator of whole self creative bravery in the production of our expressed work into the world. And so you might ask yourself, which tormented heroines capture your fascination? And are you willing to pay the cost of living in the talk to align with the gifts that she has to offer you? Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.